Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. My name is Shiro Hattori, and I will be your host today, and I'm really looking forward to talking about uplifting your university brand and also some 2024 higher ed marketing bets. And for the conversation, I actually met this person live at AMA, and this is how we connected at the American Marketing Association symposium in Chicago in November, so earlier last month. And so, I'm really excited to have Timm Baldwin join us today. He's the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Brand Strategy at Towson University. Welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. And AMA was definitely a good time. It was good to meet you there, and always love the opportunity to connect with other higher ed marketers. So
absolutely. Time. Yeah, I got to give a shout out to AMA whenever, because I had such a good time. So shout out to AMA.
All right.
And Timm, I love asking all my guests, what do you love about higher ed?
What do I love about higher ed? I will say that I'm not a career higher ed marketer. I came into this space relatively recently in 2017. And prior to that, I was doing a lot of marketing at other institutions, some that were nonprofit, some that were for-profit. And coming into higher education, the one thing that I've appreciated the most is having a mission to kind of tie the work back to. Sometimes when you're working as a marketer, you are selling a widget or an item that, the real drive is generating revenue and value for your shareholders or your stakeholders. And in higher education, I feel like what's nice about the work is that at the end of the day, especially at the end of the semester, which we're getting near to right now, we get to watch the fruits of the university's community and labor in terms of seeing students graduate. And that is probably the most gratifying thing about being a marketer in this space.
That's fantastic. Is commencement day for winter
it's literally, so it's literally tomorrow. We'll have 2 days of it. And it is, for me, I get a little wistful. I sometimes have a little bit of a pang myself to go back and study more because it's great. You see families, you see students who have put a lot of time and energy into this work. And there's nothing more gratifying than seeing how big they smile on commencement day and what an accomplishment it is for them. So it's great to be part of that. That's a really fueling kind of thing for the work that we do.
That's fantastic. I also graduated on a winter commencement, so it was a bit different, and I really enjoyed a smaller group because I did go to a big state school as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, great. Do you want to get started with telling us a little bit about your role as well?
Sure. Yeah. So like I mentioned, started here in 2017. I am responsible for really the strategy that we have in place for the university around external marketing. So that includes primarily things like enrollment marketing for undergraduate and graduate. It also includes athletics marketing. We also work in our space. Our team is responsible for managing social media for the institution, which is always a good conversation to have. Mm-hmm. We also oversee and manage a lot of the content and guidance for email marketing and for CRM use on campus. So we're a Salesforce campus. We use that 800-pound gorilla, but it's a great tool that we lean on. So a lot of different pieces and components. I'm in the central marketing unit, so within our university, and most of our structure is pretty centralized here. We do have some decentralized marketing and communications people within the colleges, but for a university our size, we have about 20,000 students, undergrad and grad. It's a fairly centralized model. So we do a lot for the institution in terms of trying to not just market externally, paid media, those types of things, digital marketing, but also trying to help in terms of setting some of the strategy around how to communicate what the value propositions will be in certain areas for campus initiatives. And so it's really great. It's great to be part of a team, a division. So we have both marketing and comms. And so we have a number of colleagues on our floor that also work on the strategic communication side. So we work collaboratively around that, and it's great work.
That's awesome. And is this foundational or systematical, like more centralization? Is that a newer thing at Townsend?
No, thankfully. I mean, I think, every university has its own kind of way of structuring to
Uh-huh.
some degree, and certainly different models work for different institutions. For us, it's been nice to have some level of involvement with the various things that are happening at the divisional level throughout the university. So we do like to partner and collaborate with our academic partners and our student affairs partners, and certainly athletics and a number of other divisions. So it's nice to have those conversations, to be really strategic partners around some of those things. And but at some institutions, depending on size, a decentralized model is a little bit more effective and works a little bit better. For us, this is pretty good at this point, and we continue to grow. And it could be that over time that continues to shift, but it's been a pretty good model in place for us thus far.
That's fantastic. Well, speaking of a prior conversation, I know early on in your time at Towson, you took on a pretty big project in 2019, which is around uplifting the university brand. Can you tell us a little bit more about where you started and how everything's going?
Yeah, it was a really exciting project. One of the things, coming into this institution that I was pleased to kind of have the opportunity to work on is brand. It's a passion of mine. I really love brand identity. I love brand work. And my charge coming into the university was to help usher in a rebrand for the institution. It was something that at the time our president had prioritized. She herself was a marketer. And so she really understood the value of brand and the need to kind of evolve the brand story here at our university. And so it was a multi-year project, as it is in the case for many organizations of this size. But we started with research, and that's also something that you don't get afforded every day, is an opportunity to really do critical research that you can use to fuel some of the work that you do. So we stepped into it in 2017, and that started with quantitative and qualitative research that we conducted both internally and externally. And we walked away with some really good takeaways that helped to serve as the foundation for the brand identity that now is in place here at the university. And when we started the project, we tried to help campus understand, marketing and comms, we weren't the people that were going to go off on high and decide what the university's brand was going to be. Our job was really to conduct research and find out what the brand already was. And we learned three important things. One, we had a great value ratio, a price to value ratio for the institution. Students and alums found that the value of their degrees was really good, and they appreciated. Secondly, we had really good personal attention at the institution. So a lot of mentorship type of relationships exist here. And that came back in the research very clearly. And the third component that we learned about was the growth of the institution, which we kind of already knew, but it was great to hear the audience, say back to us, we acknowledge that you're growing and that the growth that we see is really positive. And so we turned those three kinds of fundamental, consistent markers that we heard from many different constituents into our brand pillars, and ultimately created a brand platform and a set of key messages that supported that. And in 2019, as you mentioned, we launched, and it was married with both a new set of messages, but also a new visual identity for the institution, the first that we had in over 20 plus years. And so that was exciting to be part of. And so, that work is the kind that really energizes a campus. And thankfully, we had really good buy-in from a lot of hard work in terms of conversations and feedback, and lots of different iterations of what we had kind of generated for the campus. And so now, a couple years on, we're getting ready to do another brand perception study and see how far we've come. And that's also an exciting thing to be able to do. That's
fantastic to turn so many different things around, and is one of the first projects that's got to be exciting and also a lot of work. What is like actually translating some of that research? You said, value was one of them, the ability to connect with faculty and staff, and the growth of the school as a whole. Like what does an actual marketing campaign look like? Is it implementing those values at the strategic planning level? Just trying to visualize exactly what
Yeah.
that might look like. And I know it's not just one thing, there's a bunch of things, but can you give us some examples?
Yeah. And the question is a really good one. A lot of the folks that we talked to on campus when we started the process
Mm-hmm.
had assumed that what we were working towards was a tagline of some kind, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that this was going to become like the output of this brand work was going to be a slogan that everyone would use on everything that we did. And we were really
Right.
intentional about making sure people understood that this was not about, distilling us down to 2 or 3 words and then just repeating them. And that's a strategy that can work. But in our case, we were really more focused on making sure that the stories that we were telling across the many divisions and departments at the institution started to align. One of the challenges we ran into early on
Mm.
was understanding that no one really knew how to describe Towson, and there wasn't consistency. You would talk to 10 different people and they would all kind of say 10 different things. And when we did the brand work and the research, it became clear that we had hit the mark when everyone could see the finished messages and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I see that. That is who we are."
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a big idea. The big idea was that as a campus, we were opportunity creators. We were really here to kind of fuel the work that students were doing and the lives that we were helping to change and the communities that we were trying to impact. And that particular kind of spark of an idea is really what then served as trying to drive some consistency around the storytelling. We had 3 major pillars: opportunity, mentorship, and momentum. And those 3 pillars, we came in and we said, hey, listen, this is how to kind of talk about these things. These are some kind of starting points in terms of messages. These are some specific guidelines in terms of how you might want to frame this from your particular seat within the institution. And that really resonated. It was something that people then could take and they could say, okay, yeah, I can apply these concepts to what I'm doing. And our goal wasn't necessarily to have people regurgitate those exact words. We were like, hey, don't feel the need to force the word opportunity into everything that you're doing,
Right.
but take the concept and make sure that you're paying off and delivering on that concept. And that was a way that we really found to have success in terms of the brand, to really make it come to life and have people understand that what we were trying to give was a similar elevator speech across the institution. And whether you were in athletics or advancement or student affairs or academic affairs, what is it within your space that speaks to these core kind of pillars? And that is how we had some good success.
That's awesome. And speaking of success, the marketer in me just wants to ask, how do you even go about measuring, you have your 3 pillars. How do you measure the success of that or the results of that? And what have they been like?
Yeah. So data, right? Data is king. And everyone will tell you, you've got to have the data to support what you're doing, but also to tell you whether what you're doing is effective. I'll tell you, I think that's still a work in progress. I think it's very difficult for us, as it might be for other organizations, to be able to quantify everything.
Right.
When we rolled out the brand, we knew that the first bit of information or data we would get would be largely anecdotal. And we were happy to see that the first kind of benchmark that we passed was folks adopting it, right, internally. And we knew that it was important that the internal audience understand it, be able to kind of express it in their own way. And so seeing that happen in real time was an indicator that we were having some success. But then when we moved externally, when we took that message and we said, okay, after the first 6 or 8 months of, kind of guiding the internal audience, we got to the external audience. Then we were looking for markers of, are the external audiences understanding these concepts? Are they able to kind of report back that yes, they agree that we are,
Gotcha.
We are a place that you can find deep mentorship. We are a place where the momentum is increasing, not just for what's happening on campus, but what happens off campus. That's a harder thing sometimes to quantify. We did, a lot of conversations, which helped. The other thing we saw in terms of our institution, one of the things we did with our visual identity that was quite intentional is adopted a brand mark that had TU in it, right? So prior to doing the rebrand, we've always been known as Towson University, but prior to 1995, 1996, we were Towson State University. And so folks would sometimes refer to us as TSU. And we were still the state university to them, and we still are a state university. We certainly don't want to, kind of walk away from our roots. But we intentionally, with the visual identity, we're trying to drive home this TU brand, and to hear people start to refer to us in the community, whether that's in the media, whether that's with government partners, whether that's with other types of community groups and alums. When we heard that start to happen, TU.
That's funny.
External people calling us TU, and not just those that are internal. That's how we also started to see some movement and understand that this was kind of catching on. And we've got a lot of work to do still to do this. I mean, this is generational type of work, what we're talking about, especially in an area like Maryland where people are born and bred. And so we've got a lot of history here, which is, positive. So we don't necessarily expect to see overnight changes, but the anecdotal changes were there. And now this brand study that we're talking about doing is really going to help us more definitively quantify some things that we believe to be true, but we don't really have as much hard and fast data beyond the campaigns that we run. So,
thank you. Yeah, it's a very, I get asked about reporting all the time, and it's always a difficult question to answer, especially at that brand awareness, getting how many people are in your orbit, right? It's a bit hard to quantify those, but I think a lot of anecdotal and qualitative metrics are really helpful there. So appreciate you sharing that. This makes me think a little bit like, thinking about qualitative versus quantitative. Like, I feel like maybe there's a shift in the marketing industry as a whole where there's a lot of qualitative indicators that were maybe ignored the last 10 years because there's just all these new solutions and data tools coming out that like everyone was saying, data driven, which is a buzzword, I think. But it works for sure. But, what do you think is going to happen in the future? Like, what are some of your bets for next year and beyond in terms of higher ed marketing?
Yeah, I feel like data, it certainly has dominated the conversation, right? And digital marketing really opened the door to everyone understanding that we were going to have this opportunity as marketers to quantify almost anything that we were doing. And that chasing that was a good thing to do, I think, in terms of getting better return on the investment, better targeting, better real-time metrics that we could then optimize and update. So I think that will always be the case. But I do think, you're right. You mentioned kind of this qualitative piece, and, part of what we do as marketers is to encourage people to take action. Certainly, we want folks to, in our case, we're interested in encouraging students to visit or to apply or to enroll. And we want those metrics, and we want to be able to see some success there. But we're also really in need of trying to drive larger picture types of goals like awareness and making sure that not just the prospective student is being engaged with, but the larger region that we serve, and do people understand, what we offer in terms of value, not just to the student that enrolls here, but also to the larger community, state, and region. And when you're talking about doing that kind of work, right, the data is a lot harder to kind of grab because in some cases there's not a direct call to action. You're really just trying to kind of put your name out there. And, with digital, I think it's been a blessing and a curse. It's been a good thing because it's encouraged all of us to really spend every dollar as efficiently and effectively as we can, which is really critical in our space, particularly as a public institution. But, the data is starting to shift, right? Like when we think about the changes that are happening right now around privacy, around users really getting more control over their data, which is a good thing, right? Like, it's good that people have ultimately control over what is collected about them and how.
Right.
But that changes the landscape a little bit. And I think in 2024, we'll continue to see that. We've seen it already in the last 2 years or so. Changes that have been made. An example is, Apple encouraging users or prompting users to kind of ask them if they want to be tracked by social media sites or by other types of apps and platforms that they're using. And largely a lot of users are saying, no, I don't want that. And so that, kind of forces the conversation towards, okay, if that data, collection model changes or shifts, how do we get better data? And maybe the data isn't the only thing that we should be relying on. There is a piece of this, when you go down to the foundations of good marketing that existed before digital,
Right.
It's around reach, it's around frequency, it's around awareness, those types of things. And those things still matter. And I think that as we look towards the future, particularly in the next year or so, we're starting to broaden our message rather than being super targeted. How can we make sure that a message that resonates for a prospective student also resonates for a prospective student's parent, rather than what we used to do, which is to say, okay, parents should see this message, students should see this message. And there are platforms where that's still going to be the case, I think, email communications, direct kind of communications to users. But as we see the data kind of shift and audiences start to overlap because of that, we need to be smarter about making messages that resonate with larger groups of people. And I think that, it's cyclical, I think, to some degree, but that's a shift that we see happening and that we certainly have seen in the data that we get back from our campaigns. It's not unusual now for a parent to be grouped in with a student audience and maybe vice versa because the data is clean and clear. So we have to be mindful of that. And I think, to the extent that marketers can make messages that are still targeted to some degree, but that can be more universal, I think that's a positive thing. And it'll challenge us as marketers to kind of think about how we message and how we treat digital advertising in relation to what we would normally consider more traditional media. And I think you still kind of have to rely on an integrated approach. You still need a number of different types of platforms. You can't just do digital if you're going to try to grow an institution, for instance, of this size. But digital is still foundational. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see evolve and continue to evolve in the next year.
I know one thing we're thinking about at Concept 3D of trying next year is some direct mail and testing that out. Cause I've worked in the digital B2B space for 5 years and digital marketing almost for 10 now. And that was the rise of digital marketing. So I've only done digital. So I'm excited to see and figure out how do I measure direct mail now? How do I measure results and to see what those results are? I'm pretty excited. Is there anything you're looking forward to that you're doing in 2024? And sorry, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everything continues to change. So I feel like in some cases we're still learning in real time. Certainly social media is continuing to shift. For the first time this year, we've seen engagement on platforms like TikTok, as an example, in advertising exceed and go beyond what we've normally seen in places like Instagram and other kind of spaces where younger populations tend to gravitate. And that's the thing, the populations are really shifting, but also the way they want to consume content and information and marketing, right? So it's an 18-year-old has a pretty good read on what an advertisement is. They know when we're trying to communicate with them as an organization. And so what they're really demanding from us is less formal advertising, right? Like they're not necessarily as influenced by the 30-second commercial or the 10-second, highly polished and branded digital ad. What they're looking for is content, right? And what we can do as marketers, I think, particularly for this population, is serve them by giving them as much content that they want as possible. I think content marketing has certainly been kind of at the forefront of the last, 5 or 6, maybe more years. But I think the expectation is that students don't just want to hear from the institution or the admissions office, or even the professors, because I think they do want to hear from those populations. They really want to hear from other students. And how can we as marketers just be facilitators of that? How can we connect current students with prospective students? How can we allow people to just tell their stories in their own words? Because oftentimes they're more powerful than anything that we're going to put together in terms of messaging. And to the extent that that their experiences support and reinforce the brand, which they often do. We talked about commencement. One of the best things to do, for our division during commencement is to just talk to the students who have walked the stage and the ways that they encapsulate their experience, the ways that they talk about their 4 or more years with us, are really compelling. And those are the types of things, we've started, as an example of utilizing that powerful kind of messaging. We've started to use that at the front end of our tours, right? So when you come and visit Towson University, the first thing we show you is not the slick 30-second commercial. It's a 2-minute, kind of testimonial piece of students that have walked across the stage and what they are, how they are framing the 4 years that they've spent here. And
this is the in-person visit, by the way?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
got it.
So
Okay,
when they
that's
come for an
cool.
in-person visit, the first thing before we even talk to them, we say, hey, listen, you know what? We're going to talk to you about all the great things that happen at TU and why you might want to consider this as a place to get your degree. But we'd like to give you a kind of look into the future, what you're probably going to say about this experience, once it's complete. And I think that really helps them understand, right? What this place can do for them and what it can offer when you hear it from the people that have experienced it firsthand. So I think that's the thing, right? Marketing is always looking for new opportunities, ways to reach people. But I think, ultimately the audiences that we're serving, particularly those that are on the prospective student side, they're telling us, yeah, it's great that you want to market to us. I know that you're marketing to me. I get it. You want me to come to your university because there's a whole host of universities that are doing that. But what they really want to know is, what can I expect? And can you have it delivered to me from a person that I can trust, who will tell me something that I can really understand and relate to? And that, I think, is really what's shifted the most in terms of my job. My job is not just about coming up with a great, kind of creative work. It's about how can we just connect students better to real
That's
stories.
Fantastic. Yeah. For some reason, this conversation is reminding me, I'm in like a bunch of Reddits for marketing, subreddits. And one of them is looking at like old ad creative and how like cool it was. And like, there'll be like an old magazine ad of like a Ferrari or a Porsche, or I don't know why I keep thinking of cars, but and everyone's like, oh, this is like the golden age of ads. And, I kept thinking like, oh, they're so right. Like what happened to ads? Like they used to be so good. And someone commented and was like, no, advertising has changed. That's why it is what it is today. It's not that it's gotten better or worse. Like it's not this thing that's going to last forever the way it is. Like the brand strategy has changed from like the brand voice to like the customer voice and the influence voice, because that's what people actually care about more now. And I was like, oh, that's a good point.
One of the things that I think you went to the same kind of keynote message I did at AMA. One of the things that I remember one of the keynote speakers talking about is the evolution of brand, right? And the evolution of like what brand does. And we're at a point where brand doesn't just inform the differences or the kind of markers of, or build a connection with an audience. It builds a connection for the audience with each other, right? So it's building community. And I think, particularly for higher education institutions, what we're really trying to communicate to students is the community that they're going to become part of. And we can't do that, I think, in a vacuum of saying, okay, well, we can do that just with traditional advertising. We certainly want to include that. But I think we also have to connect them with that community so that when they make the decision to enroll, they understand not just what major they're going to potentially have, but what's the community going to be like? What am I really becoming part of? And that's where the differentiation, I think, exists for a lot of universities, is this sense that each community has its subtle differences and its unique historic kind of things and some of the traditions that, make one college or university unique to another. So I think we should lean into those and certainly to the extent that we can put those in front of students with the marketing we want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I often like to say I love community marketing because maybe watering hole is an old word to use, but you got to figure out who your community is and where they hang out. There's so much insight there. Speaking of community, kind of going into our last topic here, which is very, very high industry level, but in our prior intro, we talked about, higher ed isn't just now working towards come to our university, but really like come to a university, right? In their messaging. How do we kind of go about this and try to tackle this as an industry as a whole? Do you have any insights? There's no straight answer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big $1 million question, I think, for a lot of us
Yeah.
right now, and something that when connecting with colleagues who do this kind of work at other institutions, it seems to bubble up to the top of the conversation very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What I have started to realize in our work is that we're not just trying to communicate to students around why they might want to come to this particular institution. And certainly we have an interest in them coming, but we also acknowledge that we might not be the best fit for every student, right? Like there are certain things that we're going to offer that other universities might, and vice versa. But really what we've discovered is that we're not just having to kind of communicate to students and families around the value of Towson. We're really having to communicate around the value of higher education. And the larger conversation that's happening in our culture right now seems to be happening without a lot of our own conversation added to it, that being, of universities and colleges around whether it's worth it to even go to a university. And the data, talk about data, the data still supports that it's absolutely worth it.
Right.
And it pays significant dividends over the course of a person's career and lifetime. But we're not necessarily joining the conversation as a collective kind of group in an effective way. And we're not challenging the perceptions, because that's really what it is. It's a perception. It's not necessarily a fact. But that's a common thing that happens in our culture these days too, right? The perception is the thing that guides the thinking. And so I think one of the things we're going to have to figure out, and certainly I don't think there's been, there hasn't been one singular kind of idea that has bubbled to the top yet for everyone. But I think we're collectively going to have to realize as institutions that we need to work collaboratively around supporting, young people thinking about college as a path that's right for them. And certainly, it's not going to be the path for everyone. We acknowledge that, right? I don't think anyone is naive enough to think that college is the perfect path for every individual. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I think if we're going to impact our greater world in the way that we all talk about doing, we do need to ensure that collectively we're working to ensure that people understand that this is one of the best ways to improve your own personal path. And so I think, figuring out how we can collectively pool our resources and our communications and our marketing to benefit each other and to kind of push back some of the competition that we sometimes naturally gravitate towards, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, that's the case, right? Like everyone knows, like, who's my competitive set? Who are my students looking at that other, universities are trying to woo, and that kind of thing. I think we're going to have to more effectively kind of put some of that on the sideline and realize that the real mission that we are all after in terms of trying to drive our communities forward is to offer opportunities for students that they wouldn't otherwise be afforded. And so that means improving accessibility, telling a better story about, what our outcomes actually are, reducing costs and making it more affordable for students where we can. All of those things will help us tell a better story. And I think, I don't know that I singularly have the answer. I wish I did. But I think that, again, part of it is kind of building more of a collaborative, collegial kind of approach to this. And how can we raise the kind of the tide collectively? Because the goal here is, as I mentioned, serving our communities and making sure that there are qualified, trained, critical thinkers, right, that can push our world forward. And if there's one thing that's clear, it's that we're in need of more people who can critically think about all sorts of issues. And so that is definitely on my mind a lot. And it is something that we, like I mentioned, we kind of are having to naturally do. When you're in front of students, inevitably that question is one you have to answer. You don't just have to answer, why come to Towson? You
Right.
have to answer why a degree is going to be valuable for that individual,
Mm-hmm.
and what's that takeaway that they're gonna have. So yeah, it's a big question. I don't know if I answered that completely, but I think it is one that we need to still wrestle with.
Yeah, it sounds like, if I were to sum up everything you said in a few words, like creating that environment of open communication between, the strategic planning and the marketing planning of all the institutions
Yeah,
in the United States,
yeah,
and having somewhere where we can at least start the conversation
yeah,
would be like a good starting point. I felt that a little bit at AMA Chicago as well, because like all these people come together and it's
yeah,
very like senior level marketing all in one place, right? And I kind of felt that energy there, so that was good.
yeah, yeah. And to the extent that we can break down those um, us versus them kind of thoughts. I mean, I think that really the greater purpose that we're serving is
Mm-hmm.
to help. When we say we want to change the world, it starts with individuals. It starts with people, and if we're not doing collectively a good job of shifting the narrative towards the facts, right, which is the kind of
Mm-hmm.
surprising thing. The facts are still, that there's benefit to the individual. And if we
Mm-hmm.
can't do that, then we're not going to have success, not just as institutions, but as larger societies.
Thank you so much, Tim. We're just at about time here.
Yeah,
I'm
no problem.
wondering where our audience can follow up with you to learn what Tim is up to. And
Yeah, I mean, you can find me at Towson University, at towson.edu. You can email me directly if you ever have questions. I certainly welcome those at Baldwin at towson.edu. And I certainly love, kind of the conversations that you and I are having, and that we get to have with other, colleagues in the space, both in and out of higher education. So it's a good thing to talk about. I really enjoy it.
yeah, this was an awesome conversation. I love these like high level industry conversations. I don't always get to do them. So thanks for your time and your insight as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, catch us on the next episode. And thank you so much for listening in.